French and friends here at WCGO. I'm so honored to have Mayor Steve Hagerty here again for our Hagerty Huddle, at least in studio Hagerty Huddle. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Always a pleasure to be with you, Daniel.
Good to see you again. I want to remind people that this is brought to you by Chicago Lee Magazine, named the #1 magazine in all of Chicago. Don't just read more, read better. Okay, we've been talking over the last couple of months now, the budget shortfall that we're facing. A lot of nimble work has been done to close that shortfall right now. Can you kind of give us an update where we are, how the city has saved some money?
Yeah, real quick update. You're talking the 2017 deficit that we're in? Yeah, so the 2017 deficit, the city managers made some adjustments. And it came down to one final action that he needed to take, which is a furlough day that's coming up on Veterans Day, November 10th, at which all city employees, including those even at the library, and this was recently in the newspaper, are going to be off that day. And that saves the city, I think it's like $180,000 or so, which will basically allow the city manager to close the budget. So it's unfortunate that we're at that situation. We have to do that. Again, the city overestimated at the beginning of the year the amount of money they would get in building permit revenue, which honestly are one-time revenues. And so they need to be really careful, and we will be careful moving forward in terms of what that estimate is.
When it comes to a furlough day, obviously that saves some money, and some would say it's a significant amount of money. Is it important to kind of signal to the rest of the city that government employees are willing to take a little bit of a haircut themselves to help out? I mean,
I think that's an excellent point. And a lot of people say, oh my gosh, look at these government employees are getting a 2.5%, 3% increase. And we can talk about that later if you want to talk about labor agreements, because we had some movement on those recently. But the reality is, these same employees are also willing to sacrifice a day or two during the year, which is a furlough day, which means they're not getting paid.
Yeah.
And so, that effectively really would reduce, the amount of a labor increase that they're getting. Again, this is not something that the city manager or the city council wants to do. It very much is sort of a last resort. But we're all in this together, and balancing a budget is important.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking on that point I was making, if here at the radio station I'm asked to take a day off because the budget wasn't in order, I'm a very upset person.
Indeed.
I certainly would be, but it's public service, and so I think that I'm not sure if it doesn't even seem like that was a consideration, but I think that makes sense for people. I think that's something that will resonate. It certainly does with me as a citizen when I see that my leadership is willing to say, hey, I know you are hurting out there, so I'm willing to hurt a little bit too, because we're in this together.
And it's sacrifice to the residents too. I mean, again, if you just
that's true.
You take the library. A lot of people would use the library, or their children would use the library on a Veterans Day, and now it's going to be closed, and they're not going to be there. So, it's sacrifice all around.
Well, when it comes to being underfunded, let's talk about the first thing people want to bring up is property tax. Well, we've just had a property tax raise, and I know you've been very adamant you are not interested in going down that road again, especially not so soon.
I'm not. The only in the city manager's proposed budget, there is a 1% levy increase on fire and police pensions. Okay, and that's sort of a separate line item, and put there, long ago to make sure that we are properly putting some money aside, even though it is underfunded for the fire and police. So, you're talking 1% right there on a tax bill, of which I think it's, 15% of that total tax bill is for the city of Evanston.
Yeah.
The vast majority, as I've said before, is 2/3 of that is for District 202 and District 65, the schools, and we have great schools, but we contribute a lot to those.
Well, let's talk about police and fire pensions really quickly. I mean, this is something we have to look at long term. Underfunded. Where do we go with that? I mean, we've looked at the state getting into just a quagmire. Are we able to learn by looking at the state and kind of extrapolate on a micro level for the city what not to do?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, our pensions are really controlled by the state. The state is the one that really controls the labor agreements and everything. And so all we really control is how much more we're going to pay labor unions, 1 year to another. The pensions are all set there. They have tried to, our state legislators have tried to make changes. It's passed. It's been signed by the governor. The courts, it's challenged in the courts, and it's failing to pass through the court system because they're saying, no, the state charter or constitution here in Illinois is very, very clear about pensions. But yes, we could address this, but it may take us changing the state constitution to do that. And things aren't moving quickly in Springfield these days. So the best thing we can do is, again, try to control the cost to the extent that we can on our labor agreements.
Yeah, I don't think we would see anything happen with that, especially we're right at the beginning stages of the election year. So,
well, remember, I mean, our elections at the local level, just concluded. So we're not going to have new elections for 4 years or 3.5 years now. We did just sign a labor agreement with the Fraternal Order of the Police, okay, which are our police officers. And that agreement, there were sacrifices all around. I mean, our police labor was a real partner with the city in this. So they did not take a pay increase for the first 6 months of this year. And then for the second 6 months of this year, they're taking a, basically like a, 2.75% increase for the second year, but they're also taking a haircut on health insurance benefits, so they're going to pick up more of that. So the effective increase for the second 6 months of this year is 2.4%, actually, no, excuse me. It's like the effective for this year is like 1.375, and then next year's 2.4. So relative to other, places around there, I think, we've got a good partnership, and everybody recognizes the financial condition that we're in, and we all need to sacrifice a little.
Let's talk about freedom of information requests. That was a hot topic, over a month ago when we talked. What has happened since we last discussed
So we had a big meeting on Monday night. The City Council, actually the Rules Committee met to discuss this. There were many people in the audience, several from a group called Reclaim Evanston, and a group that's really about, accountability and transparency and all of that. And they came out in support of wanting to make sure that the city clerk remained the FOIA officer. And that was the consensus of the Rules Committee, which the Rules Committee is comprised of the City Council. So that was the consensus. The one issue that is still open, that I have strong opinions about, is where do FOIA responses go? I think we talked about this briefly last time. I feel strongly that FOIA responses should go to the requester. And right. The city clerk, in the past has said, no, I want FOIA responses to go, to the public. I want them to be public. Anyone can see a FOIA response. I have issues with that because, again, in my 5 months on the job as mayor, people email me, "Dear Mayor, I've lost my job. Can you help me find a new job? Dear Mayor, let me tell you about my neighbor, Daniel. Like, this guy's doing all sorts of illegal things. Let me tell you about my neighbor that's got the pit bull that's defecating on my property. Let me tell you about, the fact that I just lost my health insurance." And so it goes on. And it is a reality. If you're an elected official or you're a city official, you're FOIA'd all the time. All of our communication, they want to know. People say, hey, I want to see the mayor's emails from September 1st to September 30th. I want to know who my elected officials are communicating with, who's trying to influence them. And so that information is turned over. There's nothing sensitive or protected in that information, unless somebody was a juvenile or somebody had been a sexual assault victim, then there are certain protections. And so I just think that we ought to have a system, which we do, the next request system, which clearly shows what the requests are that come in, but that the FOIA response should go to the requester, and that any of us can have visibility and see all the requests that are made. And if we say, hey, yeah, I'm interested in request number 37 that was made about building permits, the FOIA officer, in this case the clerk, can fulfill it.
There's clearly a distinct difference between what the mayor might be doing than what a citizen is doing, and we have a reasonable expectation of privacy, especially when we're waging complaints using this, the resources of the city that we could be put in harm's way.
I mean, Alderman, the mayor. I mean, we get lots and lots of complaints and people that are frustrated and people that sometimes say really nasty things to us. Mayor, you're an idiot. I can't believe
that's not too
you
nasty,
agreed
but
on
no,
this. But you know what I mean? But after the fact, I don't think that they may have said that in a bit of frustration. Yeah. I'm not sure they want the whole world to know that or to see that.
Sure. Okay. Always have to ask you about developments. Any updates on some of the bigger projects that have been ongoing or on the horizon?
New ones that are on the horizon
let's hear about that.
Weren't mentioned before. So 601 Davis Street, which has been a vacant lot for a long, long time. It's right next to the the drive-through for the bank down there. There's been a proposal to put up, I think it's 32, 33 stories, so quite high. Residential building there would be commercial on the ground floor. That is now at Dapper, which is pretty much a city committee that starts to look at that, and then it will go to to the Plan and Development Commission. So that is just started the process. And then there were two other ones that have recently come on to the map. One is on Oak Street, 1727, and it's a parking lot right now. And there's a proposal to put up, again, I think it's 17-story building there that would be residential as well, but primarily I think focused on seniors. So that's in the very early stage. Again, both of those projects, 601 Davis and this other one, are parking lots right now, or vacant properties. So there's nothing that's going away for these to potentially go there. And then the other one is a different one, because that is like 1716, I think 1620 block of Chicago Avenue. So it's across from the Whole Foods on the east side. It's where Found Kitchen is, and there's several others. And this is a recent proposal that is just starting, where they want to build a 25-story building there, which would be equivalent to the one right across Evanston Park Place that's right across the street. And we'll see where that goes. So lots going on. Again, there's an organized group within the community that are very concerned about the development, and are coming out to city council meetings to voice their concern. And again, like I've said before, we've got to balance a lot of different things here in the city. We want the downtown to reflect what we want as citizens and residents, but we also need to be cognizant of our tax base and increasing the tax base. And here we are talking earlier about a $6 million deficit. And, and the fact that our property taxes are already really, really high. So
are most of the complaints you would hear about these simply the sheer size of these buildings?
No, I mean, certainly height is one concern that people express. Traffic is another. Parking is another. Losing the charm or the character of Evanston is another. And so those are, and then the other one that's interesting to me is who's going to live in the buildings. I find that really interesting. That
humans,
like,
the right answer.
Well, humans are going to be living here, but what kind of humans? Oh, they're going to be Northwestern students primarily here. So therefore I consider them to be more transient. And so I'm less interested in having them. I do not share that opinion, but it's interesting to me that people that come up, the fact of the matter is we're all residents in this community, whether you're a child in this community or whether you're a senior in this community or a student that's going to Northwestern for 4 years. So that one really, it really rubs me wrong.
I must tell you, when I was in college, I dined out a lot more than I do now. So I would welcome a bunch of students.
Exactly. I mean, the way I think about it, and I think other, the council members think about it is, on some of these apartments, and let's say the Albion development that's being talked about quite a bit, and that's further along. That's where Prairie Moon and Nevins is. That's going to be targeted primarily to millenniums. So people in their 20s, and early 30s. These are not people with kids that are going to be going into the school systems, which cost us more money. They are young professionals who are doing well, who are going to have a lot of more discretionary money that they spend, and that's good for our local economy in Evanston.
Okay, so many things we could talk about, but I want to do some of the fun thing. Well, I think this is fun personally because this is ongoing with your mission and a continued mission of Evanston to move along in this century and move away from fossil fuels. You're going to make a lot easier for businesses and residents to take advantage of solar power.
Yeah, so I think what's really exciting and fun is Northwestern entered a solar competition, and they created this house. It's called Enable. They were just out in Denver for 2 weeks, and there were about a dozen other universities from around the world that were part of this. And they walked away, and there were prizes in a bunch of different areas, but they walked away in first prize with market potential. And I walked through this house. I've met with the students that build it. This was a great house. I mean, this was a house that you didn't go and say, oh, wow, that design's funky or whatever it might be because of the solar. Like, this is a house you'd really want to live in. And they won that market potential. And I think that's really, really important because when people, are thinking about a new house, they care about the function of the house. And then to secondary, it's like, oh, well, I would really like this house to, emit less carbon and be a clean house. But that's sort of secondary. And so they figured that out with market potential. They also came in third for engineering, which I think is great for them because it's not easy to design these houses. And this house was literally, carbon neutral to the extent actually that it had excess energy from the solar that could power your car.
Excellent. Wow. Super cool. Okay. There were a lot of other things on this list that we're going to talk about, but we can see you out and about at the town again, coming up soon in another Hagerty Huddle.
You can. Actually, we're going to have a Hagerty Huddle next week. You can find it on Mayor Steve Hagerty website. It's going to be at Rockin' Ravioli, which is a new restaurant. Good. It's going to be where 27 Live used to be, and we're going to have a community conversation about Northlight Theater. And so that's another development we didn't talk about. But to make this development possible, there is a hotel that's incorporated into it as well as residential. And this will be on Sherman if it were to pass through. And it's worthy of a community conversation. So that's going to be next week. I'm forgetting the day. I think it's Thursday at 5 p.m., I believe. It's at 5 p.m. at Rockin' Ravioli on Thursday.
Okay, we'll see that. I must say, for a man with a part-time job, you've got a lot on your plate.
Thanks.
So. I do. Anyway, very humble about it. More French and Friends. You should know this has been brought to you by Chicagoly Magazine. Check out the city's best new publication, Chicagoly Magazine, awarded the best magazine in the city in just its first year. Visit chicago.ly. Chicago.ly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Daniel.